How's it going, everybody? My name's Warner Fields with Fields of Profit. I'm a six-figure Amazon seller and full-time student, and today I'm joined by John Mascarello, aka Side Hustle Experiment. He's got a big book operation, been in the game for a little bit, and now actually working on transitioning to OA a little bit. So we're going to be talking about his journey through Amazon, all that kind of stuff. For the people who don't know you, John, if you want to kind of introduce yourself and how you found Amazon, we can kind of go from there.
Yeah, sounds good. Thanks for having me, Warner. Basically, I started about 3 or 4 years ago. I started cherry picking books. For those who don't know what that means, you basically go to thrift stores, you download an app like Scout IQ, you get a Bluetooth scanner, you scan some books, whatever turns green, you take home. That's profitable. The books are anywhere from $1 to $2. Then you send them into Amazon and you send them FBA, and then customers will buy them, and then Amazon sells it to them. So I did that for about the first year or two. I was able to quit my job. I got into bulk books, which is basically you're buying gaylords of books, which is like huge boxes of books. I always just tell people, like, with watermelons or pumpkins come in the supermarket, those kind of boxes. They have anywhere from about 800 to 1,200 books inside. So I started doing that, added 2 storage units. Then about 5-6 months later, I got a warehouse. And yeah, I just celebrated 2 years being full-time in October. So yeah, I've been doing it 2 years full-time. And this now, if you're new to Amazon, they basically came out with the restock limits. And for people who sell books like me, we do a lot of single items. Like, we're not sending 10 of one book in. So the restock limits really hurt us. Amazon's like, you could only send in, I had unlimited space. Now I'm all the way down to about 3,000, which is not really feasible for a bulk book operation. You can merchant fulfill, but I do not want to do that. So yeah, I made the transition to OA. About probably September, I really started being serious. I know Warner has a lot of great videos that really helped me use TA and other things. And yeah, I'm really excited. This is my first Q4. And it's been quite big excitement so far, especially the last week.
For sure, for sure. I guess I didn't realize that you'd quit your job doing just cherry picking. Was that right?
Yeah, I was just doing cherry picking, and I just started to get into bulk a little. Like, I had no idea what I was doing. But I was like, oh, like, I'll do a hybrid, like bulk cherry picking. And then, that thing happened that basically shut down the world. And I was basically super grateful that I had bulk contacts. And that's when I really, really went like big into bulk.
Yeah. So you went bulk because it was just difficult to get in store and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and I kind of got tired of traveling. Like, I kind of underestimated a little bit. Like, when you quit your job, you're just like, oh, like, if I have twice as much as time, like, I could double my revenue. And it doesn't really work that way, because like, you're used to doing something one way, and then you get to do it full time, and it doesn't necessarily work. Like, there's not necessarily more books at the thrift store. Just because now you have more time doesn't mean they're restocking. So I quickly realized, I was like, I need to do bulk, and I like the exclusivity. I don't like fighting with people at thrifts and library sales. So it's just nice to get it delivered, kind of go at my own pace and do my own thing.
Sure. You're not the type to go in and throw elbows at the library sales.
No, that's not me. I'm like, you can have the book. I'm good.
Yeah, I've been to like a couple, and those lines are cutthroat, and like there's people in the front who've been there for like a day, and they've got like a whole team. Like
Yeah, like one of the ones I went to, I was actually talking about on Miles and the Buy Box podcast. Like, the first one I went to was, I forgot where it even was, but there was just like these empty like tubs. I'm like, what is going on? And then like, they're like, oh, the sale starting in 15 minutes. And then the first tub online, 15 guys like come out of a van, and I'm like, oh my God. And then they bring like all these tubs. I was like, this is gonna be a disaster.
dang, that yeah, the library game is a whole different game. Yeah. So I mean, you kind of hit on it. Like, it's difficult to like scale just using time with full-time books, doing cherry picking, that kind of stuff. You get to a point where there's not any books left to scan, right? So that's where you went to bulk, and now you're kind of running into an issue with bulk where it maybe even is the same issue. You can kind of speak to that. Is it if whether it's a capital thing, a time thing, what's kind of making you want to make that transition into a little bit more OA?
It's actually a mixture of both. So I'm in a very weird position. I'm not trying to brag about it, but I have a lot of capital, and at this point in time, it doesn't make sense to spend it on books. Just because like if I bought 5 truckloads tomorrow, like what am I gonna do with it? I'm gonna need like probably 5 to 8 people to process that, more people, like it just doesn't make any sense. And I could probably only send maybe 500 to 800 books to Amazon. So I'd have to merge fulfill. Like it's just not feasible. I feel like you'd have to almost do a whole merch fulfilled operation, and kind of going into getting the warehouse, I was thinking pretty much all FBA. So the warehouse isn't technically built for merchant fulfilling. I need a lot more space, and a lot of different stuff would have to happen. But I almost like kind of how I like bulk. I do like OA for the fact that, or I'm starting to like it, you could order multiple of one SKU. So when I'm doing bulk books, like you find like 300 or 400, let's just say, books. They're all different. You know that cries are different SKU. Now you're worrying about 300 or 400 items, right? When it comes to repricing or removals, like it's just a lot, and that's 1 week. Now times that by 4, and it just quickly spirals out of control. Like keeping track of all this stuff and making sure it's going well. Um, but yeah, I think the writing is kind of on the wall that Amazon's like, we don't necessarily want to encourage people sending books to our warehouses.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it feels like I think something you're kind of touching on. I just want to clarify for those of you watching, like it's very important to be minimizing the amount of items you have. That's like a very base concept. So that applies to retail arbitrage books, anything where you're buying a couple of a lot of things. You have to think about the time costs of, for in John's case, it's sorting through those Gaylords and looking for each individual book that he's going to sell one time. And he talked about how, do you use Be Cool or Reprice It for that?
So I use reprice it. So I
Okay.
basically separated everything
Yeah.
out, books and OA. So I have 2 accounts, and I'm using Be Cool on the OA account. And it's so much better than using reprice it for the
Right.
books. But it's also not built for books, and I could see a lot of like racing to the bottom for that. So
Yeah, so I just wanted to talk about kind of how because he's using so many different products, he's having to use Reprice It, which generally isn't as great as a repricer as Be Cool is. And so you just have to make a lot of sacrifices and time sacrifices, obviously, when you're making those decisions more than once. Whereas if you're buying 100 of something, you make one repricing decision, you sticker the same thing 100 times. If you have one of 100 things, you have to do that 100 times, sticker 100 different things. It's just a whole different process. And I guess that's kind of where you've arrived at. I'd rather buy a bunch of one thing and not buy Gaylords at a time. Um,
exactly.
yeah. And now that you're sitting on some capital, I'm sure a lot of you at home also have built up some capital from books or RA or whatever. And it's going to come to the point where it's difficult to buy the amount of stuff you need. In John's case, he's got to buy 5 truckloads of books to make significant dents in his capital. So you have to be kind of pricing in the cost of not spending your money as fast as you can. That really is the key to Amazon. Keep things moving, keep things spending. Even with restock limits are drastically like John talked about, they're not encouraging booksellers anymore, where if you send 500 of one fast selling product, it's gone in a month, right? But if you send in 500 books, you might have 100 left 6 months later.
Oh yeah.
So you have to consider all those things when you're considering what business model you're going into, especially if you're wanting to grow to that next level. You gotta think about how fast you can spend that money. As someone who's kind of would you call yourself? I guess you're sort of a newbie, sort of intermediate at OA now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would
So
definitely say that. Yeah.
yeah. You're kind of understanding it, but how long would you say it kind of took you to start to understand online arbitrage for those of people who are trying to make that leap themselves?
I'd probably say I'm probably seriously in it about 3 months, and I'm starting to be like, okay, like this is how this works. I've seen like some suspect like probably shouldn't have bought that, but luckily like Q4 is kind of covering that, where I'm like kind of breaking even on that stuff and kind of be like, okay, really looking back, and I think that's one of the best ways to do it, is like when something's not going right or the price tanks, Keepa, for those who don't know, it tracks like all Amazon pricing. So you can see the history of the prices, kind of looking back at that Keepa graph and be like, and you can see how many sellers are on there and be like, oh, like that's where I messed up. Like I should have looked at the sellers, or you know what, the average price of this was really $20 the last 90 days. Like it's not 60 or 40 or whatever. And kind of like looking at that. So yeah, I'm starting to like get the hang of it. And it's definitely a bigger learning curve, I would say, because for books, I sell media as well. You know, all you have to worry about is that category, right? So I know the ranks very well. You know, I know like a book with like an e-score of 151 is going to sell right away. Um, but when it comes to, you know, a beauty product or a toy or food, like the ranks are very different. All the charts are very different. So it's a lot to definitely take in and kind of learn all the differences of each product category.
Sure, yeah. So I mean, and John's been selling on Amazon for quite a while. So if you kind of dabbled in OA, you think it doesn't work, you don't like it, just keep in mind that it's taken almost 3 months to kind of start to understand what's going on. So don't get discouraged. Definitely keep at it. We're not, we're not making stuff up when we say that this is a great way to really scale to that next level. Maybe if you just want to keep scanning books and doing RA and that's fun for you, that's awesome. But these are some lessons we're trying to hammer in for those of you that really want to get to the next level. But it's important to remember that we're not all trying to build super giant businesses. But for those of you that want to take it to the next level, kind of spending that money, getting into OA is going to be a great way to do it. So what tools are you using? You mentioned Keepa. Or are there any, like, what are the paid softwares you found to be key?
So I'm using Keepa. I'm using Tactical Arbitrage. Be Cool. I'm using Seller, which I really like. That makes it super easy. And I think it's called In Stock Add-on. I don't know. It's something that like shows you how much stock it is currently at Amazon, which is super helpful.
Yeah, yeah. Have you found that in stock to be different or better than the one that Keepa has?
I feel like not. I feel like they're almost the same, to be honest. I forgot who I started using the plugin, but it's free, so I just installed it.
Yeah.
And it's kind of, I wish it like loaded more. So it can be kind of deceiving. It's some of these tools, you know, I'll watch like one of your videos or whatever. I was like, oh, like that's what that, like it doesn't like click right away. You're like,
Yeah.
oh, what is that box? And then you see someone else search, like, oh, like we go by this box when we can't determine this. You're like, oh, okay, that makes so much more sense. Like that's why this is how it is. So yeah, those are probably the main softwares, and Be Cool, obviously, for repricing.
Sure. Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
and
It's
Inventory Labs, of course, can't forget that.
right. So fairly standard stuff. I'm sure a lot of you guys who are watching this video have heard of that stuff before. But it's super important to be investing in those softwares if you really want to, take it up to the next level. Those are going to help you spend your money, help you save time so you can devote that time into growing your business instead of, doing more menial tasks. So are there any like categories you're like specifically focusing on right now?
Right now I'm focusing on grocery. I do a bit of media. It's kind of like a crutch for me because I really understand it. And that's kind of, I was really frustrated with OA when I first started because for the reasons like I couldn't really find stuff. And, you know, I also have to take into account like I run like two other businesses. Like I have the book business, I have an eBay business. So like it's kind of like, oh, like almost like a side hustle. So I kind of have to keep that into account. So I'm buying like a lot of media and grocery for the most part, and a little bit of beauty. But I'm really starting to get the hang of grocery, and I think I really like grocery.
Sure. Yeah. I did a ton of grocery when I was first starting out. I've been doing probably a little more beauty and stuff like that now, a little apparel, but there's opportunities everywhere. Whatever keeps your interest. So you mentioned that OA is kind of like you even called it a side hustle. Do you see yourself continuing like the book operation into the future? Where do you think that's going to head?
Actually, no, I was actually just talking to my girlfriend before we kind of started this, and I've been doing like a lot of OA, like with all the Black Friday deals and kind of doing a little bit of in-store pickups, like when they have limits online. And I was just like, oh man, like I just really don't want to do books on Monday. Like I'd rather just, go to the computer, like chase down leads, just order it online, have it show up, and then, just send it to Amazon and just, if it sells through, order more of it. If it doesn't, kind of, make a little money or break even and kind of move on and
Mhm.
kind of learn a lesson there. But I do see this OA just overtaking books, and just kind of doing that full time.
Sure, yeah. I mean, you're all set up with the warehouse and everything too for when
Yeah.
you're ready to jump into wholesale and that kind of stuff. You'll be one step ahead of a lot of us.
Oh yeah, and that's kind of like the big like goal. It's just like, okay, like do OA and then eventually do a little once I could phase out books, like kind of go into wholesale. And one of the big realizations to me is like everyone's like, oh, books are so cheap, books are so cheap. And while that's true, there's a lot of labor involved that's not cheap at all. Like I do have a helper, I Black Friday, obviously it's very different than normal sourcing because things are 30, 40, 50% off, right? I could sit in front of my computer and in an hour, I don't know, find $1,000 worth of profitable stuff. In an hour, me and the helper are just getting through one Gaylord, right?
Right.
And like 95% of that's garbage. I mean, not to say that like sourcing online, like everything I look at is good, but I mean, it just doesn't scale how OA could scale.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, like you're talking like spending $1,000 an hour just to not to flex on John, just want to give the viewers a little bit of perspective, but like this is a great time to start. This will go up on Monday, tomorrow for us. Like go start buying stuff. Like
Yeah.
for like a little perspective, on Friday I spent $15,000 in an hour. There's so much stuff on those online shelves that's just waiting for you to buy. Show me a retail arbitrage shelf that you can spend $15,000 on, and then maybe I will reconsider. But these are the reasons that we're really trying to harp on this.
And try to get out of the store with
Right.
$15,000.
Yeah. You're
Like
filling
10
up your car.
shopping
I
trips
hope
of
you brought a
stuff.
U-Haul. Yeah. So you see yourself kind of transitioning out slowly, whether that's this year or 3 years from now, but so kind of looking to get out of the book game entirely eventually. Is that kind of what you've decided on?
Yeah, I'm probably trying to get out. I wouldn't say like ASAP. So the most lucrative part of books for me is really eBay. Like when you could sell, right? You're finding books you're selling
Yeah.
for 150. Like
That's
our ASP
profit.
for eBay right now is I think $80. Like
Yeah.
it's insane. And that's kind of looked at as like extra money because we put all the costs against Amazon. But again, that's another thing. Like you're taking pictures, you got to store this. Like I think it's more when people say, oh, I think this is a big takeaway when you say like, oh, OA is expensive. Like you got to pay money for products and, it's 10, 15, $20. And while that's understandable, you also really have to factor in time and labor. And I think a lot of the times, like we don't factor that in. It's a lot like, oh, we made all this money, but you don't really see too many videos on YouTube of reselling like, hey, this is my day. And really go like, oh, I wake up at 7, I stop working at 8. Like, yeah, there's lunch or some food, but
Yeah.
like I'm sourcing, I'm shipping, I'm doing like talking to people on Instagram. Like it's really you know, not like spend $15,000 an hour and like call it a day. Like there's a lot more going on. But with books, it's so much more labor intensive. So it's either like, right now it's like I have the money, so like I'd rather put that towards, having someone at Walmart like pick and pack these boxes and just send it to me. And I just put a label on it and send it to Amazon, than doing all the work and listing all the books and, paying someone to do all that.
Yeah, for sure. So we're getting long on time here. So if you want to, do you have any like closing statements, anything that you really want the people to remember?
Yeah, I would just say I think one of the most important things is to stick with it. I mean, when I first started, I was like, this is so frustrating. And it's easy if you're doing something else. I know you said a lot of your audience is maybe doing books and RA, maybe some OA. It's easy when you have another way to make money. Like I have books and I have eBay. So it's very easy to be like, you know what, like OA, like this is a scam, like this isn't for me. Um, And it wasn't until I issued a challenge to the YouTube audience, I was like, listen, if I don't buy, I think it was $500 worth of stuff by in 48 hours, or I think it was a week, I'm gonna give someone $500. And then it like really is like, oh man, like I'd rather spend this on inventory. And then it forced me to find stuff. And that's kind of when it started to click. I bought it, sent it, and it started to sell. And then like I was like, okay, I got it. So I think there is a very steep learning curve to it, I would say. And like, I mean, I've been selling on Amazon 3 or 4 years. It took me about 3 months, and like I'm nowhere close to where you are and some other people that like I talk with daily. So yeah, I would just say put in the time like anything else, and like be patient with it, and learn from your mistakes. And I would say another big one is like try to find, they're really not that hard to find, but things that are almost a no loss, where like maybe the profits like $5 or $10. So like if things go wrong, like at worst you're at break even.
Mhm.
You can just learn something from it and kind of move on from there. Don't be trying to get like things with a profit of like $1 or $2, because someone else is going to find that and then the price is going to drop and then you're going to be losing money.
For sure. Yeah. That's a great place to start. Well, thanks for the for coming on the channel, for all the free info.
Yeah.
For those of you who haven't seen John before, his channel is going to be linked down below. Go subscribe to his channel. He's got lots of great content, both books. He's moving into OA, that kind of stuff. Go comment on one of his videos. Let us know that you came from here. But I really appreciate you coming out, John. Feel free to drop any questions you guys have down below. I'm always happy to answer those. And as always, I really appreciate you guys watching, and I will see you next time.